Last summer, I lost 3 healthy tomato plants, 2 mature pepper bushes, and an entire raised bed of squash in less than 2 weeks. And every single one of them died from the exact same cause: overwatering. Now here is what made that so frustrating. I was watering those plants every single day because I genuinely believed I was taking good care of them. I thought more water meant healthier plants, and I could not have been more wrong. When I finally pulled those root balls out of the soil and saw the brown, mushy, suffocated roots, it hit me that my watering habit, the one I thought was keeping my garden alive, was actually the thing killing it. And I know I'm not alone in this. If you have ever walked out to your garden and seen wilting leaves and immediately reached for the hose, you have probably made the same mistake I did, because wilting does not always mean thirsty. Sometimes it means the exact opposite. What I want to share with you today is the complete watering approach. Switch to after that disaster, the one that cut my water use by roughly 40% while producing the healthiest, most productive plants I have ever grown. I am going to walk you through exactly how to read what your soil and plants are actually telling you, how to water at the right depth for the right duration at the right time of day, and how to build a simple moisture management system that almost runs itself. And stay with me all the way to the end, because I am going to share a kitchen scrap trick that turns ordinary banana peels into a moisture retention booster that most gardeners have never even heard of. Today, I'm going to walk you through the whole process from start to finish so you can stop guessing and start watering with real confidence. For years, I watered my garden the same way most people do. I would walk out in the morning or sometimes the evening, stand there with a hose, spray water across the top of everything until it looked wet, and move on. I did that for close to 15 years. And honestly, most of my plants survived, so I figured I was doing it right. But surviving and thriving are two very different things, and did not understand that difference until I started losing plants that should have been perfectly healthy. If you have been watering on a daily schedule, or if you water a little bit every day just to keep things moist on the surface, you are not doing anything wrong on purpose. I was right there with you for a long, long time. Then I started experimenting with deeper, less frequent watering and paying closer attention to what was actually happening 6 inches below the surface. And what I saw completely reset my understanding of how water and roots actually work together. Here's what I learned that changed everything for me. Plant roots do not just passively soak up whatever water is sitting around them. They actively grow toward moisture. This is called hydrotropism, and it is one of the most important concepts in gardening that almost nobody talks about. When you water shallowly every day, you train your plant roots to stay right at the surface because that is where the moisture is. Those shallow roots are vulnerable to heat, drought, and temperature swings. But when you water deeply and then let the top layer of soil dry out, you force those roots to chase the moisture downward. Over time, you end up with a root system that is 2, 3, even 4 times deeper than what shallow watering produces. Research from Texas A&M Extension has shown that deep, infrequent watering can produce root systems that reach 18 to 24 inches deep in garden soil, compared to just 3 to 5 inches with daily shallow watering. And once you understand this, everything else about proper watering makes perfect sense. A deeper root system means a more drought-tolerant plant, better nutrient uptake, and a garden that can handle the stress of a hot July afternoon without you standing out there with a hose every single day. Now let me walk you through exactly how to put this into practice. The first thing you need to learn is how to actually check your soil moisture, because this is where the whole system starts. Forget about watering on a schedule. Schedules ignore what your soil is actually doing. Instead, I want you to use what I call the finger test. Push your index finger straight down into the soil next to your plant, all the way to your second knuckle. That gets you roughly 2 to 3 inches deep. If the soil at that depth feels cool and moist, like a wrung-out sponge, do not water. If it feels dry and crumbly, it is time to water. For larger plants like tomatoes, peppers, and squash, I actually use a simple wooden dowel, about 12 inches long and a 1/4 inch thick. Push it down into the soil near the root zone, leave it for 10 minutes, then pull it out. If the bottom 4 to 6 inches come out with moist soil clinging to the wood, your deep moisture is fine. If it comes out dry and clean, your plants need a deep drink. This takes the guesswork completely out of the equation. I check my beds this way every 2 to 3 days in the peak of summer and maybe once a week in spring and fall. If you are in zones 8 through 10 where summers get really intense, you may need to check every other day from June through September. In zones 3 through 6 with cooler summers, every 3 to 4 days is usually plenty during the warmest months. Now that you know how to read your soil, here is where the actual watering technique comes in, and this is where most people get it wrong. The goal is to water deeply and slowly so that moisture penetrates down to 12 to 18 inches rather than just wetting the top inch or two. For raised beds, I aim for about 1 to 1.5 inches of water per session. Here is how to measure that. Set an empty tuna can or a straight-sided container in your bed while you water. When there is about 1 inch of water collected in that can, you have delivered roughly 1 inch of water to your soil. For in ground gardens, you will want closer to 1.5 to 2 inches per session because the water has more soil volume to penetrate. The key is slow delivery. If you are using a hose, turn the pressure down to a gentle stream and let it soak in at the base of each plant for 3 to 5 minutes before moving to the next one. If water is pooling on the surface and running off, you are applying it too fast. I made this mistake for years, blasting water at my plants and watching half of it run right off the bed and onto the pathway. Now I use a simple soaker hose laid right on the soil surface, running at low pressure for about 30 to 45 minutes per watering session. This delivers water slowly enough that virtually all of it soaks straight down to where the roots can use it. If you are growing in containers, the approach is slightly different. Water until you see it flowing out of the drainage holes at the bottom, then stop. That tells you the entire soil column is saturated. For a standard 5-gallon container, this usually takes about 45 seconds to a minute of steady pouring. Here is the next piece of the puzzle, and it is one that I wish someone had explained to me 20 years ago. When you water matters almost as much as how you water. The best time to water your garden is early morning, ideally between 6 and 9 in the morning. At that time of day, temperatures are cooler, wind is usually calm, and the water has time to soak deep into the soil before the heat of the day causes evaporation. I tested this myself over 2 full growing seasons. I had 2 identical raised beds with the same soil mix, the same tomato varieties, planted on the same day. One bed I watered in the early morning, the other I watered in the late afternoon, around 5 or 6 in the evening. By the end of the season, the morning watered bed produced about 25% more fruit by weight and had noticeably less fungal disease on the lower leaves. The reason is straightforward. Evening watering leaves foliage and soil surface wet through the cool overnight hours, which creates ideal conditions for fungal diseases like powdery mildew, early blight, and damping off. Morning watering gives the soil surface and any splashed foliage time to dry during the day while the deeper moisture stays protected underground where the roots need it. Now, I want to be straight with you. If early morning is not possible for your schedule, late afternoon is your second best option, around 4 to 5 in the afternoon. Just try to avoid watering in the midday heat when evaporation rates are highest, and avoid late evening watering if you can because of that fungal risk. In zones 7 through 10, where humidity is already high during summer, morning watering becomes even more important because you are already fighting fungal pressure from the ambient moisture in the air. All right, I want to pause here for just a moment because what I have been sharing with you today is really just one piece of a much bigger picture when it comes to growing food sustainably and efficiently at home. If you are enjoying this kind of practical, no-nonsense gardening guidance, I put together something called the 30-Day Kitchen Scrap Garden Protocol. It is a 171-page guide that walks you through regrowing 31 different crops from kitchen scraps, includes a $10 starter kit guide so you do not overspend getting started, zero waste kitchen strategies, and complete troubleshooting support for every step along the way. You can grab it for just $17 by scanning the QR code on screen right now or clicking the link in the description. It is the natural next step if you want to build a garden that is both water smart and waste-free. All right, let us keep going. Now here's where things really start coming together. And this is honestly the part that made the biggest difference in my own garden. Mulching is the single most effective thing you can do to support everything we have talked about so far with deep watering, morning timing, and moisture management. A good layer of mulch acts like a blanket over your soil. It slows evaporation dramatically, keeps soil temperatures more stable, suppresses weeds that compete with your plants for water, and over time, it breaks down and feeds your soil biology. Here's exactly what I do. After planting and after my first deep watering session, I spread a 3 to 4 inch layer of organic mulch over every exposed inch of soil in my beds. I leave a 2 to 3 inch gap right around the base of each plant stem to prevent moisture from sitting directly against the stem, which can cause rot. For material, I prefer shredded hardwood bark, straw, or chopped leaves. Each works well, but I have found that straw is my best performer in vegetable beds because it is lightweight, breaks down at a moderate pace, and does not mat down and become water repellent the way some wood mulches can. If you are in zones 8 through 10, I would lean toward a slightly thicker mulch layer, up to 4 or even 5 inches, because you are fighting more intense heat and evaporation. In zones 3 through 5, 3 inches is usually plenty, and you want to be careful not to go too thick early in spring because heavy mulch can keep cold soil from warming up when your plants need that warmth to get established. Here's the result I have measured in my own garden. Beds with 3 to 4 inches of mulch retain measurable moisture at the 6-inch depth, roughly 2 to 3 days longer than bare soil beds receiving the same amount of water. That means instead of watering every 2 to 3 days in peak summer, I can often stretch it to every 4 to 5 days. Over a full growing season that adds up to a tremendous reduction in water use and time spent watering. The last piece of this system is learning to read your plants themselves, because they will tell you exactly what they need if you know what to look for. This is something that comes with practice, but let me give you the key signals to watch for. Healthy, properly watered plants will have leaves that are firm and turgid, meaning they hold their shape well. The color should be a consistent green, appropriate to the variety. In the heat of a summer afternoon, it is completely normal for some plants, especially squash, cucumbers, and large-leafed varieties, to wilt slightly during the hottest part of the day even when they have plenty of water. This is called temporary wilt, and the plant is simply reducing its leaf surface area to conserve moisture. If those same leaves perk back up by early evening or the next morning, your watering is fine. Do not reach for the hose. The signal that tells you a plant genuinely needs water is when you check in the early morning before any heat stress and the leaves are still drooping or feel soft and limp. That is real drought stress, and it means the root zone has dried out enough that the plant cannot maintain its internal water pressure overnight. On the other hand, if you see leaves turning yellow starting from the bottom of the plant and working upward, and the soil feels consistently wet at the 3-inch depth, you are likely overwatering. The roots are suffocating because waterlogged soil has no air pockets, and roots need oxygen just as much as they need water. I lost more plants to this than I care to admit before I learned to read these signals properly. Now let me walk you through the most common patterns I see that cause watering problems, because understanding these will help you avoid the mistakes I made for years. The first pattern is calendar watering. This is where you water every single day, regardless of what the soil or plants are telling you. I did this myself for over a decade. Monday through Sunday, out, with the hose. The problem is that soil moisture levels change based on temperature, humidity, wind, rain, plant size, and a dozen other factors. A schedule that makes sense in June might drown your plants in October. What works better is checking your soil moisture with the finger test or the dowel method every 2 to 3 days, and only watering when the soil tells you it is time. This alone will prevent most overwatering problems. The second pattern is shallow, frequent watering. This is the light daily sprinkle that keeps the surface wet but never drives moisture down deep. It feels like you are being attentive, and I completely understand the impulse because I did the same thing. But as we talked about earlier, this trains roots to stay at the surface where they are vulnerable to every temperature swing and dry spell. The better approach is fewer, deeper watering sessions that push moisture down 12 to 18 inches and encourage those roots to follow the water down. The third pattern is overhead watering during the wrong time of day. Spraying water over the top of your plants with a sprinkler in the evening feels efficient because you are covering everything at once, but you are wetting every leaf surface, creating the perfect environment for fungal diseases and losing a significant amount of water to evaporation or wind drift. What I have found works better is watering at the base of plants, at soil level, in the early morning. Soaker hoses and drip irrigation are your best friends here. They deliver water right where the roots can use it and keep the foliage dry. The fourth pattern, and this one surprised me when I first recognized it, is ignoring soil type. Sandy soil drains fast and needs more frequent watering, maybe every 2 days in summer. Heavy clay soil holds moisture much longer and may only need watering once a week or even less. If you have clay soil and you are watering every other day, you are almost certainly overwatering. If you have sandy soil and you are watering twice a week, your plants might be struggling. The fix is to know your soil type and adjust accordingly. A simple jar test can tell you what you are working with. Fill a quart mason jar about 1/3 full with soil from your garden, add water to near the top, shake it vigorously, and let it sit undisturbed for 24 to 48 hours. The layers that settle out will show you your sand, silt, and clay ratios, and that tells you how your soil handles water. Now here's the bonus tip I promised you at the beginning, and this one genuinely surprised me when I first tried it. You can use dried banana peels as a natural moisture retention amendment in your garden soil. Here's how it works. Save your banana peels and let them dry out completely. You can lay them on a baking sheet in your oven at the lowest setting, usually around 170 degrees Fahrenheit, for about 2 to 3 hours until they are brittle and completely dry. Then, crush them into small pieces, roughly 1/4 inch or smaller. When you are planting or top dressing your beds, work about a 1/2 cup of crushed dried banana peel into the top 3 to 4 inches of soil around each plant. The dried peel material acts like a sponge in the soil, absorbing and holding moisture at the root zone level while also slowly releasing potassium, which is one of the key nutrients your fruiting and flowering plants need. I tested this in 2 identical containers of cherry tomatoes last season. The container with banana peel amendment held measurable moisture about a day and a half longer between waterings than the control container, and the plant produced noticeably more fruit clusters. It is not a miracle solution, but as a free amendment you are literally pulling from your kitchen waste stream. It is remarkably effective and fits perfectly into a sustainable, waste-conscious gardening approach. Now, what I have shared with you today is a complete foundation for smarter watering. But it really is just one part of building a garden that works with nature instead of against it. If you want to take this further and start growing food from scraps you would normally throw away, I put together the 30-day kitchen scrap garden protocol. It is 171 pages covering 31 regrowable crops from kitchen scraps, a complete $10 starter kit guide, zero-waste kitchen strategies that pair perfectly with the water-saving techniques we talked about today, and full troubleshooting support, so you are never stuck wondering what went wrong. It is just $17, and you can grab your copy by scanning the QR code on screen or clicking the link down in the description below. It is honestly the guide I wish I had when I started trying to garden more sustainably. So the next time you walk out to your garden and see those leaves looking a little droopy in the afternoon heat, I hope you will pause before reaching for that hose. Check the soil first. Trust the process. Let those roots grow deep and strong. I would love to hear how this works for you, so drop a comment below and let me know what changes you are going to try first. Until next time, happy gardening, folks. And remember, work with your soil, not against it.